Hi, this is Joe Paprocki, National Consultant for Faith Formation from Loyola Press, and it is my pleasure to be the host of this webinar, Walking the Spiritual Path, a webinar with Lisa Kelly. As you can see, Lisa's in the house, and I will introduce her in just a moment, but you can see that she's excited, enthusiastic, and happy to be here to talk about this notion of walking the spiritual path. A couple of housekeeping details. First of all, welcome. You're in the right place. And a recording of this webinar is being made as we speak, and you'll be able to find that recording at ignatianspirituality.com within a day or so. We usually get that up pretty fast. In case you want to watch it again, slow it down, listen to some parts that perhaps went a little too quickly for you, or just to dwell again on something that Lisa shared, or to share with your friends. You can definitely share that link with anyone else that you want. And of course, many people who register are watching this as a recording because they couldn't be here live. And so we'll be sending that link, the recording link, to everyone who's registered. And one more time, I'll say that we are in webinar mode, meaning that you will only see and hear myself and Lisa. Everyone else will not be able to unmute or to turn their camera on. And so we can just keep our attention on Lisa as she's talking and sharing. Please use the chat for any comments you may have, or introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from. But if you have questions for Lisa, go to the Q&A feature and put your questions in there. And in a few moments, we'll be delving into the Q&A and having a nice conversation with Lisa about that. In the meantime, I'd like to introduce you to Lisa Kelly. Hi, Lisa. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm humbled. I am so humbled by this.
Oh,
Just
wonderful. We're
amazing.
excited to have you. Folks, Lisa is, first and foremost, she's an Ignatian associate. She'll tell us a little bit more about what that's all about. But as you see, as we jump down to the bottom of that short bio, her specialty is incorporating spirituality into personal and organizational growth. So, Lisa, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what an Ignatian associate is, and then tell us a little bit more about this bringing together spirituality and organizational growth.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thank you, Denise, and thank you all for showing up. I honor your time. Time is just such a gift for all of us. So thank you so much for that. I would say my primary vocation is first and foremost as a wife and mother. I have four kiddos, all adult, grown out of the house. But they have definitely been a huge part of my spiritual path over these years. I am a lifelong Catholic, but I really wasn't introduced to Ignatian spirituality until I was about 27. And that's when I became an Ignatian associate. So I've been there for about, a good 20, 25 years. And it really is where I felt a new way of being Catholic, a new way of living my faith. So the Ignatian Associates are intentional communities of lay people. I think we have 6 different communities in the United States. All of us are formed in the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius, and we are intentional about getting together and continuing to practice our spirituality, both individually, with spiritual directors, and as a community. So when I first started IA 20 years ago or so and did the spiritual exercises, what I was discerning was really to be a full-time mom or to follow my master's degree and have a career. And that discernment profoundly changed my life. I discerned to be a full-time mom. And in the process, that really opened me up to an Ignatian world I never could have fathomed before that. We ended up being crazy enough to take 3 kids under the age of 8 to Bolivia, and
Oh,
then to live and work in the Dominican Republic at the Jesuit mission ILAC in Santiago, and then ultimately even to El Salvador and the UCA, which was just very powerful spiritually for me. And in all of these places, I really resorted to writing to help process my spirituality and all these new experiences of God and responding to marginalization and things like that. And so that's kind of where writing started for me, spiritual writing. And at some point, I started blogging for Loyola Press. So I
Hmm.
thank Denise for that. She has been my editor and my saving grace and my cheerleader for years now. So
Sure.
huge shout out to Denise.
Yeah.
And today I am an accompanier in the Discerning Leadership Program and co-director of the Listorta Center for Spirituality and Leadership.
Well, you gave a really great plug for Ignatian Associates. I bet they're going to be getting calls about, how do I become an Ignatian Associate? So that's wonderful. We are part of the Jesuit ministry here, so we want to support all of our partners and shout out to all of the Ignatian Associates all over the world. And speaking of writing, you decided that you were going to write a book for Loyola Press, and we were very lucky to have that book and to publish it. And it is hot off the presses, and it's called The Spiritual Path: Embarking on the Journey of a Lifetime. Tell us a little bit about the book, Lisa, and what we might expect from it, and then we're going to draw from this during our conversation today.
Yeah, so my interest in spirituality and leadership started decades ago. I was on the board of a global faith-based nonprofit, and we were literally just trying to figure out how to develop our own leadership. And it seemed like many of the leadership tools out there that were faith-based were not for lay people. And so we resorted to kind of looking at what corporate tools were out there. And there's quite a few of really, really good corporate tools available that we were trying to adapt. And one of them, I was invited to a workshop called Your Best Year Yet. And it was an afternoon workshop to personal and organizational goal setting. Best Year Yet was written by a book written by a woman named Jenny Ditzler in 1994. And at the point when I came to the workshop, it had been already translated into multiple languages. It was used globally. There were coaches, there was a website, a tool, a digital tool. It was very advanced. But for me, it was an afternoon that just screamed to me Ignatian. And it was in no way Ignatian language, but the process that Jenny offered was just very, very powerful. So I ended up actually becoming a Best Year Yet facilitator. And at the
Really?
time, I really focused on helping to nonprofits, particularly faith-based nonprofits, to do some personal and organizational goal setting. But what I found in doing that is that language, the corporate language, really wasn't comfortable for faith-based people or
Sure.
organizations. They weren't about profits and productivity. So I asked Jenny, can I translate this into Ignatian? And she said, yes,
I love
go
that.
for it. And so I did my first spiritual path retreat in 2015. And every time I did a retreat, people said, where's the book? Where's the book? I want a book to take
Uh,
us home. So that I put on my path, and that's where we are today. So what you're really going to get is the book is a retreat for the reader to articulate your own spiritual path and to discern where and how you're being called in your life and to form that in clear goals.
And so now when people ask, where's the book? Where's the book? You can literally hand it to them. And so that's wonderful. Congratulations on the book. Folks, there's a QR code on the screen. If you wanted to scan that, we'll show that again later at the end of the retreat. But our purpose for being here is to have an experience for all of you today about this notion of going on a spiritual journey, walking the spiritual path, and in many ways, how we prepare for that. And so we're going to unpack that in a little while. Now, I recognize these shoes. Lisa, I'm not going to steal your thunder,
Okay.
but obviously they speak to us of a journey. And you use this, you talk about a spiritual path, spiritual journey. And so, what does that mean to you? And what are you offering to your readers to approach the spiritual life as a journey? And tell us about the shoes.
Oh man. So yeah, as an Ignatian associate, we start our formation doing a spiritual autobiography and looking back over our lives. Where has God been? Where have I avoided God? This book is really a way to look forward in this journey that we're on. Those shoes are from my pilgrimage, my Ignatian pilgrimage I did with my husband several years ago. And it was a really pivotal moment when I saw those shoes. Those are Ignatius's shoes under glass.
Yeah.
And I realized he's as human as as I am. He was as human as I am. So the shoes are really where the rubber hits the road in this faith journey. How am I walking my walk? How am I talking my talk? And I hope this process gives people a very practical way to live and articulate and practice that journey. I think our faith is never, our journey is never A to B. There's no really
Yeah,
there to get
that's a good
to.
way of putting it.
It's always going to change and be very dynamic because life is dynamic. Our contexts change, our invitations change, our temptations change. So that metaphor of a path is really obvious to me. I grappled a bit with calling it the spiritual path because I really don't think there's any one way to God.
Right.
Everybody's path is very unique. But I think kind of in the Ignatian tradition, it does offer a way of proceeding through an Ignatian lens, but yet it's applicable to any context. So I go back to this process again and again. I rewrite my spiritual path every 6 months. I'm constantly refining my own journey through this.
Yeah, and your timing is perfect because we're in a jubilee year right now, and one of the mainstays of a jubilee year is a pilgrimage. And so many people will be embarking on pilgrimages, whether they're local or around the world. And pilgrimages, in many ways, concretizing the experience of the spiritual journey that is throughout our entire lifetime. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. One of the things that you introduce in the book, which I think is you see this as a critical thing for the reader to understand, is something that I actually only learned about maybe within the last 20 years myself. This word which was new to me, and I was even like, how do you pronounce this? So the colloquy is something that Ignatius talked about, and you believe that this is an integral part of the work we do on a spiritual path. Tell us about the colloquy.
Yeah, it really is. You know, we have a spectrum of prayer, so many different ways to engage our higher power. And some people, it is repetitive, rote, meditative prayer. And then the other end of that spectrum is your stream of consciousness. Dear God, help me find a parking spot. And both of them kind of have a place. One, where we can meditate and free our minds from thinking, and maybe the other one from God's with me every second of every day. But the colloquy is really right in the middle of that spectrum, I think, with a dedicated prayer time for a real conversation with kind of your higher power. And I think there's two key aspects to it. First of all, it gives you a dedicated time and space to articulate what's going on inside of me in response to whatever's happening around me. My spiritual director will say, name it, sit with it. It's real. Whatever you're feeling, name it and sit with it. So I do that in the colloquy. But then the second part is really crucial. And that's with any good conversation, you got to listen. And a lot of people will say, I'm listening to God, I'm listening, I don't hear anything.
Yeah, what are we listening for?
And so that's where the Ignatian imagination really jumps in. Ignatius says very clearly, imagine Jesus sitting in a chair in the room. And it doesn't have to be Jesus. I use the term walking partner because our understanding of God is so broad from so many different contexts. But it's using that imagination to imagine, what would my walking partner say to me in this situation, and having a conversation about that. So it's really important to be comfortable having that conversation. And I think about it as if you're literally walking along a road, having a conversation with somebody.
That's a great image. When I first learned about the colloquy, I thought of Fiddler on the Roof and Tevye, how many times throughout the story, he's walking along the road and he just stops and he's like, "Dear God," and he just starts having a conversation with God. And in many ways, that's illustrative of what we're talking about. St. Ignatius did teach that prayer should resemble one friend speaking to another. And I think
Mm.
for some of us that comes as a bit of a shock. We think we're supposed to use, highfalutin language and very formal ways. And he's saying, no, you can just say, hey, God, why this? Why that? And have a conversation. So this is going to be an important part of what you're going to share with us during this webinar, how we talk and how we listen to Jesus. Now, we don't normally talk about planning our spiritual life. It seems like that's just counterintuitive that you would plan your spiritual life. In fact, we have that phrase that God would laugh at something like
Yep.
that, and because we think of that as control. But you're talking about planning how we can collaborate with
Mhm.
God, right? And so you do see planning as a part of the spiritual journey.
Yeah, I think they also say if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So there's
Okay.
a different spectrum
Yeah.
on that. But the book really is a journey, but there is a very clear horizon, and that is to articulate a 6 month or 1 year plan for co-laboring or collaborating with
Mhm.
God. And it's a very cumulative journey. So it's not just a book that's inspirational, but it's also very, very practical. And it will require the reader to engage in the process and some effort through those colloquies, through different activities or different questions to be answered. So like any journey or hike or trip or pilgrimage, it's really good to be clear on why am I doing this? With who am I doing this and the how for doing this. But I think the planning really offers us a way to articulate what very often maybe we just assume we're doing, or maybe we haven't made clear to those around us why we're
Yeah.
doing it. Uh, and really, where are we going with this? Is it just life as immediate response to everything, or life as, no, this is building, this is growing, I'm changing, I'm working here.
Yeah, and it,
Um,
it strikes me again as one of these, what you're talking about as a middle ground when we talk about planning. On the one hand, we don't plan out our spiritual life because that is trying to control. On the other hand, we don't just say, okay, I'm on a journey, whatever happens, I mean,
exactly.
okay, that's fine and good. But there is some degree. I guess I think of that joke or story about someone who's asking God for help, and they're in a need to be rescued, and a helicopter comes, and there's all these other helps come, and they're like, God, why didn't you rescue me? And they're like, I'm the one
Yep.
who sent the helicopter, and so on. That we need to pay attention to. Okay, how am I going to cooperate with what God is doing, and how do I discern what God is doing? And so this whole first part of the journey, this
Mhm.
planning, requires us to do some work. And you've put together a chart that is going to help to guide us through the work of spiritual growth, spiritual discernment. You call this the cycle of growth. So tell us what we're looking at here and how we apply this and on our spiritual journey.
Yeah, so in the traditional best year yet, when Ginny first offered this, she called this the cycle of productivity. But the first time I saw it, it just jumped out at me. That's Vatican II. That's See, Judge, Act. It was very clear. Ignatian pedagogy would add reflect to this cycle.
Yes.
And I really see it as a cycle of growth on the spiritual path to a deeper and deeper relationship with God. If you have read Pope Francis's Let Us Dream, the whole book is a deep dive into this process and our call to use it practically in our daily lives. So, this cycle of growth is really the how of the spiritual path. It's cyclical, not linear. It's an ever deepening process, because no matter what you're doing, no matter what situation you're in or how you're trying to figure out to respond, you recognize God is with me. in all of this. I first see the reality before me or before us. What's going on here? I'm just suddenly aware of this is happening. Then you have to judge or choose your response. Then you have to actually act on that response, actually do something. But then finally, the last step is to actually reflect on the whole course. And we realize God was with us in all of that. God was with us in what we saw and what we chose not to see, maybe. God was with us in the choice we made. Did we consider gospels or church teaching or feelings appropriately? And then God was even with us in the acting. Why did I
Mm.
resist acting on this? Or wow, I was able to do something I never imagined I was able to do before. So to prepare for the journey, I really try to guide readers, first of all, name their why, name their who, but also to consider this how.
And as we look at this, I do want to remind folks that we're going to have Q&A in about 25 minutes or so. And if you have questions, especially when you look at a chart like this that Lisa is explaining right now, you may have some questions. Please go to the Q&A and put your questions in there at any time during this webinar. And as I mentioned, in about 20 minutes or so, Denise will magically pop back up here
Mhm.
and facilitate a Q&A with us. But I think that this you mentioned that this is we tend to think in linear fashion. Okay, and I'm going to see, judge, act, reflect. I'm done. And you refer to this being a kind of a spiral for us. I'm moving forward to the next slide here so we can see that. Um, you're taking us into what you see as sort of like the second aspect of this whole journey, which you refer to as the Buen Camino. And you talk about beginning with what you refer to as the inward spiral. So unpack this for us, please.
Yeah, when you walk the Camino, either the Camino Santiago or the Ignatian Camino, people all along the way are just saying to you, Buen Camino, Buen Camino. And that's really just have a good journey. And it's not just start well, it's keep journeying, like encouragement, keep journeying, buen camino. And so this is really where your journey starts, is an inward spiral, looking in at yourself, in your current reality, recognizing the divine at work within you right here, right now, wherever you are, whatever your context is, and even some challenging people a bit to some of the limiting voices that can really be obstacles on our spiritual journey. And I really think in some ways this is a secret sauce of this
Mm.
process to help set your mindset of how you are uniquely showing up on this journey at this place and time. If you just sat down and listed out 10 goals, our tendency, or my tendency, would be, first of all, to note my defects. What do I want to change? What do I want to get rid of? Rather than looking at my giftedness and my identity. And that changes this whole dynamic of the spiritual journey. Where are you starting from? So the first part of the process, or the Camino, is about you.
Mm.
And finally, one thing I also love about the process is the inward spiral is part of your plan. So you
Okay.
will revisit what you discern here every single month to be sure you are navigating this journey from a space of right relationship, both with yourself and with your walking partner.
And I think that as I mentioned before, we tend to think in a linear fashion. This idea of inward spiral, and soon you're going to talk to us about the outward spiral. Seems to be it's a very Catholic notion, a very Ignatian
Mhm.
notion, because there are some strains within Christianity that simply emphasize the idea of I have my moment, I'm born again or whatever, and then I just go on with the rest of my life. And what you're suggesting is that we have this constant revisiting, so that
Mhm.
even if we finish a part of the journey, like we do a pilgrimage or something, uh, that is simply the precursor to the next one. Am I right?
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, and it's never done. I think even laying on our deathbeds, Ignatius says, what are you going to say to yourself at that point?
Yeah. It's
Uh,
very true. I mean, and why we spend so much time and attention to that final journey.
mhm,
Last month, we laid to rest a dear aunt of mine, and many of us were able to visit her during those final days and when she was in hospice. And that was all part of the journey
mhm.
of, helping her make that transition into the next life. And so, yes, this is something that we begin when we begin, but then we never end. We just continually are entering another part of the journey, and you move us then during this motion inward to an outward motion, and you talk about the outward spiral. Is this something that happens within every experience we have, or is this deal with, one part of life is inward, one part is outward? Can you clarify a little bit what you're sharing here?
Yeah, definitely. The spirituality is never just vertical. It always has to be expressed in how we show up in our daily lives. And so this is the part of the process where you discern with your walking partner, where am I being invited as a collaborator or a co-laborer over the next 6 months or year, using your colloquy, using your Ignatian imagination. Uh, you're going to live this out in your daily life. Literally, where's my time going to go? Because it's going to go somewhere. And I think that sometimes people don't realize we're already all on a spiritual path. We have been since we were born. But sometimes, and most of the time, we just don't articulate it. We don't take the time to talk about it with God and say, hey, what's going on here? Where am I heading? Where are you calling me? Uh, and so I think the difference here is you have that chance to really frame, where am I going with all this? And what's unique about the spiritual path is it frames goals not in terms of personal achievement, but really in terms of your relationships
Hmm.
and recognizing, like, I can't be all things to all people. So really, what am I called to do with the time I have and show up? And first and foremost is your relationship with yourself. You are the only person who can take care of yourself. And so that has to be a part of every spiritual path. Ignatius learned that when he tried to not take care of himself, and it didn't go over
Yes.
too well. You may also have relationships with entire groups of people or with individual people. I talk about in the book, like all my homies from work. I had entire groups of people that I seriously relationships with that were part of my spiritual path. It can also be relationships with people you don't even know. I would say, honestly, this is a huge example of my relationship with everybody in the audience right now, everybody listening. I have a relationship with you. I have a duty and a responsibility to show up in a certain way for you. And I don't even know you, but I can tell you I love you. And maybe there's even a new relationship that you're asked to being discerned, a blank space, and you're like, I don't know what this relationship is going to be yet, but I think I'm being called to X, whatever that is. So the goals you set on this path are really how you feel called to live out these relationships very intentionally and very practically.
You touched on many, many important things. One thing that jumped out on me there was early on, you talked about the futility of measuring success. And
Mhm.
I'm, not quoting you directly, but I believe you said something about that. And so, the notion that we always want to quantify things, and we always
Mhm.
want to measure things. And I think there was a time in our church's teachings when we maybe focused a bit too much on kind of grace as a quantifiable um, reality, something that you could kind of earn and then measure. And your focus is the notion of grace as relationship, and we don't
Mhm.
measure a relationship. We simply know when we're in a good state with someone or when we're in the doghouse, right?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because there's a part in the book where I do ask people, and I do quantify my relationships in my gut on a scale, because we all do this anyway. We judge everything. We judge our pizza delivery drivers. I mean, we do. And so I think it's okay to articulate in a very clear space, how am I feeling about this relationship right here and right now? And where do I feel called in this relationship right now? And it's your own personal rating scale. No one else sees it, but
Hmm.
it gives you a chance to really say, yeah, oh, on a scale of 1 to 10, this is right now about a 4. I need some work.
Yeah.
So it does help.
Yeah, and I think as well it prevents us from, trying to put our sight on the end goal all the
Mhm.
time, and it focuses us on the present.
Yes.
How is my relationship now? Not, okay, I'm going to do all these steps and then my relationship will be with God will be perfect. And it just doesn't work that way. So it's each day, taking that pause and reflecting, not quantifying, but reflecting on where that relationship is at. And so when
Mhm.
we talk about being in the state of grace, I just ask people, if you want to understand that, just think of your most important relationship and
Mhm.
how's the state of that relationship. If
Mhm.
you're in a good place, then that's what it means to be in good graces with someone. If we're in the state of grace with God, we're in a good part of our relationship with Him. If we feel distant, we feel totally separated, obviously, then we are in a different state of grace. And so this is very helpful for us, I think, to get us out of this linear thinking and more into this notion of an ongoing journey that we're always reflecting on, always discerning. Which brings us then to the third aspect of this journey, which is making sure that you have all the right tools as you're walking on a journey. I love the metaphor because one of my best-selling books is called The Catechist Toolbox, and so I'm very
Mhm.
much into this notion of tools. And so, in many ways, this part of your book is where you are sharing the spiritual toolbox. And I wish we had time to go through all of these. I'm going to put them up on screen so we can all see. But tell us what you mean by having tools with us for walking the spiritual journey, and then give us some examples, maybe, three out of this list that you can go into a little bit more detail.
Yeah, again, I think this is where it might be different than just sitting down and making a list of my goals. Because if you don't have some tools, you're just going to keep doing the same things you've always been doing and trying to go towards somewhere else. So these tools, some of them are really very powerful and very simple. Some of them are just disposition changers,
Mm,
practicing breathing, gratitude, seeking grace. We hear them again and again, but do we really use them as part of our daily practice? But then some are actually going to require maybe doing faith a little differently. Something like get a spiritual director, set up a personal board of directors, things like that.
mm,
And most importantly, to realize that you aren't trying to reach this horizon alone. You
mhm,
have a walking partner with you. And that is the one tool I haven't found recognized in any other process. When you have a
mhm.
goal, it's not just your goal, it's your goal collaborating with your higher power. And that makes a huge difference in your capacity to actually reach this goal. I find for me, the Examine is the most powerful tool out there. And so actually, I created a daily Examine specifically for the spiritual path so people can continue to incorporate that see, judge, act, reflect cycle of growth
Mhm.
into every day because it makes it practical and continues the journey from this framework and process. So when you start to become aware of the spirit showing up in you, with you, and differently every day, it really starts to spill over into all the relationships of your life, not just the ones you've identified a goal around.
And tell us more about this notion. I love you use the phrase disposition changers.
Yeah.
I think we underestimate that. I want to hear what you have to say about it, and then I'd like to share an example. I think I know what you're talking about, but what are some examples of disposition changers, and why do we need to change our disposition?
Yeah, so remembering this is a tool in your toolkit, we all have these immediate reactions to things. Fight, flight, freeze, fawn, several. Often we forget friend that we could actually
Yeah.
engage this issue. But a disposition changer is a tool that you say, wait, stop, how am I coming at this? And let's ask for a little divine intervention here, maybe through breathing, through your journaling, through simple processes that get you to not just react spontaneously or react from a unhealthy place, maybe.
That's very helpful. I think I was on that right track. I know breathing is something I'm a firm believer in doing to change disposition. One thing that's big for me is my daily exercise,
Mhm.
whether that's going to be walking or running or riding the bike or doing some strength training or something. It's sure, part of it is about I want to stay fit, and I also, maybe a little bit of it is vanity, and so on. But ultimately, I'll, I look forward to that, especially around this time of the day. So here in Chicago, it's coming up on 3 o'clock or so. Sometimes, you've just about had it, but but long before this time. But no, sometimes you're just like, okay, I need to do something to change my disposition. I mean, I can feel my blood boiling, or feel myself getting anxious, or getting tired, or whatever. And so I can't wait to get outside, take a walk, go down to the basement and do some exercise, and so on. Uh, is that part of the spiritual journey?
Oh yeah, and that's definitely a tool. If you recognize that that works for you, use it as much as you can. For some people, that physical activity will be so important to their self-care. They'll actually set that as one of their goals. My relationship with
Okay.
myself requires that I do this.
Okay.
And you recognize God is in that. God wants you to be healthy. And so I definitely have that on my path plan, but it's definitely also a tool you can use to change your disposition and keep going on your path.
Yeah, that's so helpful. Folks, we're going to be doing Q&A in just a few minutes, so if you have some questions, especially about any of these tools that, again, we don't have time to go through all of them. I am going to ask Lisa about one more. You may want to ask a question, or you may want to share something about that tool and then ask a question. So in about 5, 10 minutes, we're going to be getting to Q&A. Please use the Q&A feature for that. But Lisa, I'd like you to, one jumps out at me that, again, I'd like you to clarify for me, the fight through. Um, that's something that I struggle with, because it seems like there are times to fight through, and then there are times to just surrender. And I don't think I ever really know which one I'm supposed to do at which time. That's a very hard thing to discern. Share some wisdom about this notion of fighting through.
Yeah, actually, this comes honestly, that term fight through comes from general leadership coaching tools to recognize it's not always going to be picture perfect or easy to do this. And the
Right.
initial honeymoon energy you have to dive into a goal won't always be there. And so
Right.
you really have to commit. I heard it explained a bit on another book about having an if then plan. If I don't get up and do this in the morning, then what does that mean for me?
Mm.
And preparing it in your head, how I'm going to fight through to make sure I get to this, knowing my temptations to,
Mm.
not do something or to react in another way. So fighting through, really, though, it was what Ignatius said as well. He said, be prepared for those spirit not of God negative energies that are going to hit you. Store up your consolation in your good time and have those ways of discerning in the challenging times. And so that's really a fight through, is really includes all those things like deathbed invitations and what would you tell a friend
Mm.
and things like that. They all fit in fighting through.
I like what you said about, when the honeymoon is over, and there is a honeymoon phase very often of spiritual quests. and then we hit that plateau, and it's very often that it can happen to us that we just want to give up. I remember one time I was visiting with a priest friend of mine who was doing ministry, doing prison ministry. And I had students with me, high school students, and one of the students asked him, um, Father, how many lives do you think you've turned around, on this journey you've been going through prison ministry? He goes, oh, let's see, I've been doing this about 15 years, probably about 10,000 inmates. Six. And he said, next question. And I was like, whoa, excuse me. I said, I need to ask you something. What keeps you going? I guess I was asking, how do you fight through? And his answer startled me, and I think it's what you're getting at, Lisa. He said, I do it because it's the right thing to do. Jesus said, when I was in prison, you visited me. And so, when he needs to fight through, when he's thinking, I'm not making a difference here, he just tells himself, I do it because it's the right thing to do. Right now, there's no whoo,
Yep.
hoopla moment of spirituality. It's just sort of grinding through. But sometimes you just tell yourself you should keep going.
And you listen to God telling you you should keep going.
Okay.
You don't really want to.
Very helpful. Thank you for that. Now, we're going to transition in a moment to our Q&A, but before we do that, you had some information that you wanted to share with people about if they're going to use your book. In many ways, you're going to be walking them through a step-by-step process of this. How do I plan to collaborate or co-labor? I love that phrase you used with God. But then you also emphasize that when folks are done with the book, they're just beginning their relationship with you. So tell us what this is all about.
Yeah, so when you finish the book, you will have a one-page spiritual path plan with your goals identified, as well as other parts that we talked about earlier from the inward spiral. But that's where you begin, and you do that cycle of growth again and see, what am I going to do over the next 30 days to start walking this path towards these goals, towards this horizon. And you continue that cycle, discerning what those next steps are going to be, acting on them, actually doing them in the next 30 days, and then reflecting. And that reflection, I call it a monthly scenic overlook. And it takes about 30 minutes or an hour, maybe, just to again look back. Where have I been in the last month? What happened? What didn't? What can I learn? All in a colloquy with your walking partner. And then discern your steps for the coming month using that same exact process. It's a really important to have that reflection piece, because that's where we don't burn out. That's where we don't get exhausted. And that's where we adapt our plan. There's a big difference between giving up on your goals and just adapting them, reframing them, revising them. Now that you're in a different part of the journey, or a different terrain, or a different weather pattern, I guess. So the monthly scenic overlook, you can do it alone, no problem. You can also do it with others who are sharing your path. If you've decided to do this book with a group of people, each of you doing your own or with your spouse, you say, hey, every certain time, let's all get together and check in with each other. How are we doing on this? It's also great to do a monthly check-in with your spiritual director anyway. So this is great fodder for that.
Sure.
And then finally, I'm thrilled or excited to make available to anybody who wants a free public Zoom call through Listorta. We do it the first Monday of every month from 7 to 8 Central Time. You just sign up by going to the Listorta website. You don't have to talk. You can ask questions. You can hear about others' journeys. I'll be there. No cost, no commitment.
Nice.
Your commitment is just to your relationship with your walking partner and your desire to live out your faith. That's really the only, and this is one more tool you can use to do it. So
Tell us what La Storta is.
Listorta is a nonprofit dedicated. It's a center for spirituality and leadership, and kind of dedicating to give people practical tools on how to integrate.
Okay, and the words mean what?
Oh, Listorda was the stop in Italy, a small town in Italy,
Okay.
where Ignatius stopped right before he went to Rome and asked the Pope for an opportunity
Mhm.
to build a new order. And
Awesome.
it really was a challenging time for him, but it came 16 years
Mhm.
after his initial, we'll say, cannonball moment.
Yeah.
Uh, so really, it symbolizes for me this journey
Yeah.
to walk with God, and this place to ask God, be with me
Mhm.
now. I get what this journey means. Be with me.
The path can be long, 16 years. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that.
And it
That's
kept going after
awesome.
that.
Lisa, this sounds to me like your book would be very helpful for people during the season of Lent, which is going to be upon us soon.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts about that?
Oh yeah, because Lent just gives you a dedicated time, 40 days. If you can say, hey, I'm going to do this in the beginning of Lent, the first 10 days, I'm going to give myself time to get through the book. And then I'm going to give me my first 30 days is going to be in that Lent.
Mm.
And at the end of it, great. You celebrate at Easter, you get to celebrate what you've been able to do. But then Easter season continues and you get to do your next 30 days and your next 30 days. So
Great.
it's a great way
Perfect
to.
timing. Your book is coming out at a wonderful time, just like I said, with the Jubilee year underway, pilgrimages happening, and Lent is a pilgrimage, a spiritual
Mhm.
pilgrimage, and a dedicated time. And so I think people are very thankful and appreciative of that. Well, thanks so much, Lisa, for walking us through your understanding of this spiritual path. And you touched on so many issues. I'm sure that there are folks with some questions that have come up along the way that they would like to tap into your wisdom a little deeper. And so, as we can see, our friend, and I can say our friend because Lisa and Denise have
Yeah.
known each other for a long time, and so that was wonderful to learn that. Denise is back and has been sifting through questions that are coming in, and I will turn it over to you, Denise. You have plenty of time.
Okay, great. Lisa, we're going to start with a question, and at least 6 different people have asked this one.
Okay.
Um, so Carlitos, I think, was the first one to ask, what is a personal board of directors?
Oh, wow. A personal board of directors is a group of people, and maybe you would call them a mentors in some cases. Identify, I would say, 3 people in your life who they are really there for you. Uh, Not necessarily a two-way street. I don't know how to say that, but you take them out to dinner once a quarter. That's usually my board of directors meetings, and say, okay, here's where I've been. Help me, and here's where I need your wisdom, and here's where I need your insight. Jesuits are fantastic at doing this, but really, it's people where I don't have to worry necessarily about when we get together, they're going to tell me all their stuff that's going on too. I do have those people, very surely, but my board of directors are the 3 people I go to and say, here's my journey, here's where I'm celebrating, here's where I'm struggling, here's where I need some wisdom.
What an awesome idea.
Yeah.
Denise, I think we're going to start our own boards of directors. I mean, that's just so cool.
I
What a
think
great
that's a
idea.
wonderful idea.
Yeah.
And then related to that, and then expanding into the next question, we're getting some questions about finding a good spiritual director. And is the spiritual director part of that board of directors?
Um, Finding a good spiritual director, it varies by place. I don't know if there's one set list. I know there's a Spiritual Directors International. Not all of them do Ignatian spirituality, so you may want to clarify if that's the kind of support that you want. Would the spiritual director be part of that board of directors? Absolutely could be, uh, depending on their comfort level of if you want to meet with everybody all together, because some spiritual directors like, no, this is me, you, and God, and that's what we're going to work on most here. So there's no hard and fast rule for how you do it. I would discern that as well with your spiritual director. But really finding those other mentors or people who get your values and get your wavelength of where you're trying to go. Really important to have them along.
If I may jump in there too, I think you mentioned Spiritual Directors International. You can visit their website and they have a directory, geographical. It's a good
Mhm.
place to start. You may not find an Ignatian director there, but a good place to start. Also, calling or looking at your diocesan website.
Mhm.
Very often they will list spiritual directors or retreat centers where there are spiritual directors. That would be another good place to look and to get started. And also word of mouth. Talk to people who are deeply spiritual in your parish, your pastor, staff members, religious deacons, and so on, and ask them about they might be able to recommend someone.
Also at universities, I know Creighton has there are
Yes.
Masters in Christian Spirituality program where they're training spiritual directors. So they have an ongoing list of graduates. I know there's also spiritual director programs in New Orleans and in Chicago and lots of places. So you might look at your local Jesuit university or Christian spirituality program as well.
Okay. Sister Shaw is asking, couldn't the word observe be used in place of judge? Judge seems to have a negative connotation.
Yeah. I would put observe in the C phase of the cycle because you're observing without judgment. Whoa, what's going on inside of me? Or whoa, look at what's happening around me. Or whoa, what that person just said. And where it made my heart jump. Judge, I think Pope Francis used choose, decide. That's the part of the cycle where, okay, I've seen as much as I can see in the time I've had available, and I've informed my conscience really well, or whatever I need to inform to make this decision. And then judge, you actually make a decision. So I would say choose, if that's a little more gentle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it could be a matter of semantics because I can understand how, sometimes we talk about, don't judge other people, and yet at the same time we're called to make wise judgments in our lives. So we are called to judge. So I think staying away from, the understanding of judge as coming to a snap decision, and the catechism even warns against rash judgment, rushing to judgment against others. But certainly, part of discernment is coming to choosing and making a decision. That is a judgment, a spiritual judgment.
Yeah, and I think it's important not to forget that word discernment there because
Throughout.
we've been talking about that, but that's what I'm getting when we get to that judge step. So Susan asks if you could maybe give an example of annual goals and then monthly goals to get there.
Oh yeah, I do this a little bit in the book, and I'm going to give a non-spiritual one first. So if you have an annual goal of next year at this time, I want to be sitting on a beach in Waikiki reading a book. That's a really specific, they would say SMART goal. It's time bound. It's, fits all those things. But the monthly goals, there's a lot of steps you're going to have to take each month to get you there. Now that's a non-spiritual one. You're going to have to book the tickets, save up, get your time off work. The first thing you do is not go out and buy the book. That's not, the step you need to do right away necessarily. So in a spiritual goal, I would say things like, I want to have my spiritual director, or 6 months from now, the spiritual path will be published and available to readers. That's a goal in my plan right now. So I'm working towards that. This is part of that, working towards, and I have to do little pieces each month to get to that 6th month goal in my relationship with my audience.
If I can clarify, then it sounds like you're saying that sometimes our goals are some of them come out of us personally, but others are given to us. Your book, you signed a contract, you had to produce a book by a certain date. That becomes your goal. But what you're saying is you want to reach that goal in a healthy way with the zeal and everything, right? So sometimes things are almost imposed on us.
Yep. And with my walking partner. So yeah, you have to look at what's already on your horizon. You're already a parent. You're already in a vocation. So that's obviously part of it. But how do you want to live that out? How do you want to show up? What's going to be the case? And we talk about different types of goals. There's the repetitive practice goals that I just want to do this and get better at it. And then there's other destination goals where I want to be here. I want to graduate. I want to finish. Two different types of goals. You can have both, and it's good to have both on your plan.
Excellent. Let's do one more, Denise.
Okay. So this is an anonymous attendee has asked, if I feel God is calling me one way, but my family and responsibilities are calling me in a different direction, how do I do both well? Or can I?
Oh, wow. Great place for discernment. Fantastic place for discernment. I always start being honest with yourself. Ignatius says very clearly, once you've made a commitment to a vocation, that commitment becomes your first priority. But at the same time, I think letting the other know you're feeling this calling, if this is a commitment of love that you've made, they're going to support you in whatever way you can do that. So my husband's commitment, his calling to do research on Rutilio Grande in El Salvador, I had to come along the ride with him to do that. And it ended up being good for me. So whomever you're with in your current vocation or commitments, bring them into that calling. They very well are part of it.
Excellent. I'm just amazed at how the depth of that answer you just gave on being put on the spot. That was wonderful, Lisa. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Denise, and thank you everyone for bringing those questions. And we're just about out of time, so I want to wrap things up first of all by thanking you, Lisa, for spending this time with us. It was just a delight, and I learned so much. I mean, I read the book already, but then to be able to listen to you talk about it, there were just so many things that jumped out at me that I must have glossed over that, really have hit me in a different way. And so I appreciate that. Thank you for the time, Lisa, and for sharing with everyone.
Thank you guys, and thank you all for showing up, and buen camino for all
Buen
of us.
Camino, absolutely. So the book is The Spiritual Path, Embarking on the Journey of a Lifetime. And it's by Lisa Kelly, who you've had the pleasure of listening to during almost this past hour, almost an hour. Recording has been made of this and will be available at ignatianspirituality.com. It will be emailed to all registrants as well. On your screen, there is a QR code that you can scan right now to take you right to the information about how to get the book from Loyola Press. You can also go to store.loyolapress.com. You can also call our customer service line, 800-621-1008 during business hours, and talk to one of our friendly customer service people live, not a recording, not AI, real people. And so thank you all once again. My prayer for you is that you will find the guidance of the Holy Spirit on your spiritual path, and that you will learn how you and I can collaborate with God so that our spiritual lives bring us closer to God's embrace. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everyone. And until next time, this is Joe Peprocki from Loyola Press. God bless.